Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm really glad you're here with me today. This is the place where learning English isn't boring or stressful, but turns into a real adventure you can enjoy. Today we're starting the powerful life story of one of the greatest leaders the world has ever known, Nelson Mandela. This isn't just another history story. It's a journey full of hope, courage, and strong determination. As you listen, you'll naturally improve your English vocabulary, pronunciation, and listening skills. But even more than that, this story will push you to dream bigger and never give up, no matter how difficult life becomes. So take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's begin the incredible journey of Nelson Mandela, a man who truly changed the world. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in a small and peaceful village called Mvezo, located in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. At birth, he was given the name Ralilila Mandela, which in the Xhosa language means pulling the branch of a tree. Some people also say it can mean troublemaker, and honestly that name later made a lot of sense because of how bravely he stood up against injustice. He was born into the Thembu royal family, a tribe with a long and proud history. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakaniiswa, was a respected chief and an advisor to the Thembu king. Even though Mandela's family was not rich, they were highly respected by everyone around them. His mother, Nosekeni Fanny, was a deeply religious Christian woman who taught him important values like kindness, humility, and faith from a very young age. Mandela's childhood was simple, but it was full of happiness. He grew up living in a small hut made from mud and straw, surrounded by wide open fields and rolling hills. There was no electricity, no running water, and none of the modern comforts we're used to today. Still, as a young boy, Mandela felt free and content. He loved running barefoot across the land, herding cattle, and swimming in nearby streams. He played traditional Xhosa games with his friends and spent evenings sitting by the fire, listening to elders tell stories. Many of those stories were about brave warriors and strong leaders, and they lit a quiet fire inside his heart. One day his father told him something he would never forget. A true leader isn't someone who chases power for himself, but someone who serves his people. Those words stayed with Mandela for the rest of his life. When Mandela was just 9 years old, his life changed forever. His father became sick and passed away. Losing him was deeply painful, but it also marked a major turning point in Mandela's journey. After his father's death, his mother took him to live with Chief Janjantaba Dalindibo, a powerful and respected leader of the Thembu people. The chief welcomed Mandela into his home like a son. For the first time, Mandela experienced a life far beyond his small village. He lived in the chief's palace, where he watched important meetings and learned about leadership, tradition, and responsibility simply by observing the adults around him. Mandela started attending a local Methodist school when he was 7 years old. It was there that his teacher, Miss Ndingane, gave him the English name Nelson, which was a common practice for African children at that time. Mandela didn't really understand why he needed a new name, but he accepted it and focused on learning. He quickly proved to be a hard-working and curious student who wanted to understand everything. He especially enjoyed English literature, geography, and history, and he was deeply inspired by stories of African heroes who resisted colonial rule. Years later, Mandela would often say that education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. This belief about changing the world pushed him to study harder and think bigger about his future. As I grew older, I started noticing the deep inequalities all around me. South Africa was controlled by a brutal system called apartheid, a system that forced black and white people to live completely separate lives. Black people were denied basic rights. We couldn't vote, own land, or live in the same neighborhoods as white people. I saw this injustice everywhere I looked, and it slowly opened my eyes to the truth of the country I lived in. When I was 16 years old, I took part in a traditional Xhosa ceremony that marked the transition from boyhood to manhood. During that ceremony, the elders spoke about the responsibilities of becoming a man, but they also spoke with pain and sadness about the suffering of our people under apartheid. Listening to them, I felt something heavy settle in my heart. In that moment, I developed a strong sense of duty, a responsibility to stand up for justice, dignity, and equality for my people. At the age of 19, Chief Janjantaba arranged a marriage for me as tradition demanded. But deep inside, I knew my path was different. I wanted to continue my education and make my own decisions about my life. So I made one of the boldest choices of my youth. I ran away to the busy city of Johannesburg, leaving behind the life that had been planned for me. When I arrived, I entered a completely new world. The city was full of energy and opportunity, but it was also full of hardship. Black people worked long hours for very little money and lived in terrible conditions, while white people enjoyed comfort, wealth, and privilege. To survive, I worked as a night watchman at a gold mine while continuing my studies. I lived in a small, crowded room and often went to bed hungry, but I refused to quit. I believed with all my heart that education was the key that would unlock a better future. Eventually, I enrolled at the University of the Witwatersrand to study law. I was one of only a few black students there, and discrimination was a daily reality. Instead of breaking me, it made me stronger and more determined than ever. Around this time, I joined the African National Congress, an organization dedicated to fighting for the rights of black South Africans. I attended secret meetings, listened to powerful speeches, and shared my own ideas about justice and freedom. I dreamed of a South Africa where people of all races could live side by side in peace and equality, a country where children could play together without fear, where families could build secure futures, and where justice would finally prevail. That dream became the driving force of my entire life, even though I knew the road ahead would be filled with sacrifice, pain, and struggle. When I first arrived in Johannesburg, I was just a young man with big dreams. The city was alive with movement and ambition, but it also exposed the harsh reality of apartheid. Black people were treated as second-class citizens and pushed into overcrowded, impoverished areas known as townships. I rented a tiny room in Alexandra, one of the poorest townships, and worked as a clerk in a law firm. The job was demanding, but it allowed me to understand the legal system and see how it was used to control and oppress black South Africans. Every night, I studied by candlelight, determined to complete my law degree no matter how difficult things became. My hunger for knowledge felt unstoppable. I often reflected on a truth that guided me throughout my life. I had walked a long road toward freedom, stumbling at times and making mistakes along the way. But I learned that after climbing one great hill, you only discover that there are many more hills waiting ahead. That understanding didn't discourage me, it prepared me for the journey. The African National Congress had existed for many years, but I, along with a group of young, passionate members, believed it was time for stronger action and new ideas. Many of us young activists believed the movement needed new energy and a fresh direction. Because of that, we helped create the ANC Youth League, a group focused on waking up young people and pushing them to stand up against apartheid. My speeches during this time were strong and emotional. I spoke openly about justice, equality, and the need to stop waiting and start acting. People respected my courage and my vision for the future. One line I often repeated came from deep inside me: "It always seems impossible until it's done." While I was working with the ANC, I met a woman who would become very important in my life. Her name was Evelyn Toko Mays. She was a nurse, intelligent and kind, and she shared my dream of a free and fair South Africa. We got married in 1944 and started a family together. I loved my wife and my children deeply, but my commitment to the struggle often pulled me away from home. My personal life was never simple. I constantly tried to balance being a father and husband with my responsibility as a leader. I truly believed that there was no passion in accepting a life smaller than the one you are capable of living. In 1948, the government introduced even harsher apartheid laws, making daily life for Black people more painful and restrictive. These laws controlled where we could live, where we could work, and even who we were allowed to marry. My colleagues and I in the ANC knew we could not stay silent. We organized peaceful protests, strikes, and marches across the country. I strongly believed in nonviolent resistance, inspired by the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. Thousands of people joined us, risking their jobs, their homes, and sometimes their lives. The government responded with cruelty and force. Protesters were beaten, arrested, and in some cases killed. I was arrested many times, but I refused to surrender my purpose. I came to understand that courage is not about having no fear. True courage is moving forward and inspiring others, even when fear is present. Despite all these struggles, I achieved one of my lifelong dreams in 1952 when I became a lawyer. Together with my close friend Oliver Tambo, I opened the first Black law firm in South Africa. Mandela and Tambo attorneys offered free or low-cost legal help to Black South Africans who were suffering under apartheid. During the day, I stood in courtrooms defending people who had been treated unfairly. At night, I worked with the ANC, planning our next steps in the fight for freedom. In 1960, a tragic event changed everything. During a peaceful protest in the town of Sharpeville, police opened fire on the crowd. 69 people were killed and hundreds more were wounded. The massacre shocked the world and deeply shook me. I realized then that peaceful protest alone might no longer be enough. Soon after, the government banned the ANC, forcing many of us to go into hiding. We formed a secret armed group called Umkhonto we Sizwe, which means Spear of the Nation. I made it clear that our goal was not to harm innocent people, but to damage government structures that supported apartheid. From that moment on, I became a wanted man. I traveled across South Africa in disguise, organizing resistance and recruiting others. I also secretly traveled to other countries to gain international support for our cause. During this time, people began calling me the Black Pimpernel because I was so difficult for the authorities to capture. But my life was full of danger. I could not see my family, and every single day I knew could be my last one as a free man. In 1962, my journey took another dark turn. I was finally arrested and charged with sabotage, treason, and attempting to. They accused me of trying to overthrow the government, but I refused to stay silent. I used my trial as a chance to speak directly to the world about apartheid and its cruelty. In my most famous speech, I told them the truth from my heart. I said that I had fought against white domination, and I had also fought against black domination. I spoke about my dream of a democratic and free society where all people could live together in harmony, with equal opportunities for everyone. I made it clear that this dream was something I hoped to live for and achieve, but if it ever came to that, it was also an ideal I was prepared to die for. After the trial, I was sentenced to life in prison and sent to Robben Island, a cold and isolated prison off the coast of Cape Town. Life there was brutal. I was forced to do exhausting hard labor in a limestone quarry under the burning sun. I lived in a tiny cell with no bed, only a thin mat on the floor. The guards treated us harshly, and I was allowed just one visitor and one letter every 6 months. Still, I refused to let prison break my spirit. Instead, I used my time to think, study, and prepare for the future. I even learned Afrikaans so I could better understand my enemies and communicate with them. I also taught younger prisoners about leadership, discipline, and the importance of never losing hope. I have always believed that I am an optimist, whether by nature or by upbringing, I can't really say. But to me, being optimistic means keeping your face toward the sun and continuing to move forward, no matter how hard the road is. As the years passed, I slowly became a symbol of hope for millions of people around the world. Protests against apartheid grew stronger both inside South Africa and across the globe. World leaders and international organizations demanded my release, but the government continued to refuse. Many people believed my fight had ended once I was locked away, but the truth was the opposite. My imprisonment became the spark that lit a worldwide movement. I spent 27 long years in prison, most of them on Robben Island. Every single day tested my patience, my strength, and my will. The guards often tried to humiliate me, but I stayed calm and dignified. The work was painful and exhausting, yet I kept my spirit alive. I came to understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but the victory over it. A brave man isn't someone who feels no fear at all, but someone who learns how to overcome that fear. During those long years, I became more than just a prisoner. I became a symbol of resistance against injustice everywhere. People around the world shouted my name, chanting, "Free Nelson Mandela." My name was whispered in classrooms, sung during protests, and written on banners held high in the streets. While I remained behind bars, South Africa itself was under pressure. The apartheid government faced massive protests, nationwide strikes, and growing international sanctions. Countries stopped trading with South Africa, and famous musicians like Stevie Wonder and Bob Marley dedicated songs to the struggle and to my freedom. Even from inside prison, my voice was not completely silenced. I found ways to secretly communicate with other ANC leaders, continuing to guide the movement and prepare for the day when freedom would finally come. From inside prison, I even began quiet negotiations with the apartheid government. I understood something very important. If South Africa was ever going to truly win, it needed peace, not revenge. Hate would only create more suffering, and I didn't want that future for my people. On February 11, 1990, The whole world watched as I finally walked out of prison. I was 71 years old by then. My hair had turned gray, but my spirit was still strong. Standing before the crowds, I spoke from my heart. I told them I was not a prophet, but a humble servant of the people. I said the time had come to heal old wounds and begin the hard work of rebuilding our nation. When those prison gates opened, the streets exploded with joy. People cried, danced, and celebrated. My release wasn't just about my freedom, it marked the first real step toward a free South Africa. After my release, I faced one of the hardest questions of my life. How could a country heal after so much pain and injustice? Many people wanted revenge, and I understood their anger. But I chose a different path. I spoke openly about forgiveness. I sat down with the very people who had oppressed me and worked alongside them to build a new nation. I truly believed that holding on to resentment was like drinking poison and hoping it would kill your enemy. I became the leader of the ANC and focused all my energy on preparing South Africa for its first democratic election. My goal was simple but powerful: to create a country where everyone, black, white, Indian, and colored, had equal rights and equal dignity. In 1994, history was finally made. For the first time ever, all South Africans were allowed to vote. People stood in long lines for hours, some with tears in their eyes, just for the chance to cast a ballot. On April 27, 1994, I was elected the first black president of South Africa. My inauguration was filled with hope and emotion, and leaders from around the world came to witness the moment. In my speech, I promised that never, never, and never again would this beautiful land experience the oppression of one person by another. South Africa was beginning a new chapter, and I stood at the center of that moment with deep humility. As president, my main focus was unity. One of my most symbolic actions was supporting South Africa's national rugby team, the Springboks, during the 1995 Rugby World Cup. Rugby had long been seen as a sport only for white South Africans, but I wore the Springbok jersey and stood proudly beside the team to show the nation that unity was possible. That powerful moment of reconciliation later inspired the movie Invictus, named after a poem I deeply loved. The poem ends with words that guided my life. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. After serving one term as president, I stepped down in 1999. I wanted to show the world that true leadership is not about holding on to power, but knowing when to let it go. In my later years, I dedicated my life to promoting peace, education, and the fight against poverty and HIV/AIDS. I traveled across the world, met with leaders, inspired young people, and reminded everyone that forgiveness and determination can change the course of history. On December 5, 2013, I passed away at the age of 95. The world mourned the loss of a giant, a man shaped by struggle, sacrifice, and hope. Millions of people came together to honor my life and my legacy, not just as a leader, but as a symbol of what humanity can become when we choose courage over hatred and love over fear. As we come to the end of this story, I want you to slow down for a moment and really sit with everything you've just heard. Nelson Mandela's memorial was attended by presidents, world leaders, celebrities, activists, and ordinary people from every corner of the planet. That alone tells you something important. His life didn't just touch one country or one generation. It touched humanity itself. And that's why his legacy doesn't belong only to South Africa. It belongs to all of us. When I think about Mandela's journey, what strikes me most is not just the victories, but the patience it took to reach them. This was a man who spent decades behind bars, waking up every day in a cold prison cell, unsure if he would ever see freedom again. Yet even in those moments he refused to let hate take control of his heart. That choice, choosing patience over anger, hope over despair, is what changed history. Mandela taught us that the road to change is never straight or easy. It's long, painful, and full of moments where quitting feels like the smartest option. But he showed us that real strength isn't loud or violent. Real strength is quiet. It's the strength to keep going when nobody is watching, to hold on to your values when the world tries to crush them. He proved that greatness is not something you're born with. It's something you build, step by step, through discipline, sacrifice, and belief. Mandela didn't wake up one day as a hero. He became one by making difficult choices over and over again, even when those choices cost him his freedom, his comfort, and years with his family. And that's why his story matters so much to us today. Because most of us are not facing prison cells or apartheid governments, but we are facing our own struggles. We face fear. We face doubt. We face failure. We face moments where life feels unfair and overwhelming. Mandela's life reminds us that those moments don't define us. What defines us is how we respond. Forgiveness was one of Mandela's greatest lessons. After everything he suffered, he could have chosen revenge. No one would have blamed him. But he understood something most people never realize. Hatred only creates more chains. When you forgive, you don't free your enemy, you free yourself. That belief helped heal an entire nation that was deeply broken. Mandela showed us that leadership is not about power or control. It's about service. It's about lifting others up even when you're tired, even when you're hurting. He stepped down after one term as president, proving that true leaders don't cling to power. They prepare others to carry the torch forward. His journey also teaches us patience. Change doesn't happen overnight. Mandela waited 27 years for freedom, but he never rushed his principles. He trusted that consistent effort, even when it feels invisible, always adds up. This is a powerful reminder for anyone who feels like their hard work isn't paying off yet. When Mandela said, "I never lose. I either win or learn," he gave us a new way to look at failure. Failure is not a dead end. It's feedback. It's part of growth. Every mistake is a lesson. Every setback is preparation for something bigger. And here's something important I want you to hear clearly. You don't need to be Nelson Mandela to live by these principles. You don't need fame, money, or a platform. Leadership starts in small moments. It starts when you choose honesty instead of shortcuts. When you choose kindness instead of anger. When you stand up for what's right even if you stand alone. Every generation needs people who are willing to carry these values forward. People who refuse to give up. People who believe that even small actions can create big change. Mandela believed that deeply. He believed that one person with enough courage and patience could move the world. So when life gets hard, and it will, remember his story. Remember the long nights in prison. Remember the years of silence. Remember that even then he kept believing in a future he might never see. That kind of belief is powerful. And it's available to you too. If you're struggling right now, this message is for you. You are not weak. You are not behind. You are not finished. Just because the road is hard doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Growth is uncomfortable. Change is painful. But both are necessary. Take one small step today. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Read one page. Learn one new word. Make one brave decision. Speak up once. Try again one more time. Small steps, repeated daily, create unstoppable momentum. Mandela didn't change the world in one day. He changed it by never giving up on it. And that's something we can all learn from. As we close this story, I want you to carry one simple idea with you. Your life matters. Your choices matter. Your actions matter. You may never know how deeply you affect others, but you do. Just like Mandela, your story is still being written. So choose hope over fear. Choose patience over anger. Choose courage over comfort. And remember, as Mandela himself said, the greatest glory in living is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. This may be the end of Nelson Mandela's story, but his legacy lives on, in me, in you, and in every person who chooses to keep moving forward.